myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on that.
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. Thursday night, I'm joined by Supermac, Malcolm MacDonald, and Gibbo, John Gibson. Good evening, lads.
Hi, boys.
Good evening, Steve. Hiya, John.
Great, great to see you guys, and I always enjoy Thursdays because I get a chance to talk football because I get bogged down in takeover talk the rest of the week. But apologies for watching, that's why we're a little bit late. Malcolm, as you all know, is a dog man, and I've had to talk to Malcolm about cats for a couple of minutes before we came on air, so he understands the cat case. But honestly, lads, I mean, we went down when I left you guys last week. I went down to London. Part of the protest group that travelled to London. We campaigned admirably down at Parliament Square. There was a 300 strong group of Newcastle fans from all corners of the UK had travelled down, and young Holly Blade, 16-year-old, stood outside Downing Street. She handed the letter in. She gave a wonderful speech at the age of 16, guys. And, we carried ourselves well. And then there's a small group of protesters went up to the Premier League, did the same up there. The Metropolitan Police said that they were absolutely delighted with the way that Newcastle fans had conducted themselves and behaved. And, that it made a refreshing change from what they'd seen in the capital only a week earlier with England. So, proud to be part of it. I was at the background. I was just supporting it. I went down and supported it, Malcolm. Sadly, though, we ended up with the news on Monday that arbitration will not take place until next year, which almost was like blowing a balloon up, ready to take off, only to have somebody come along with a big pin and pop it. It was deflating, I think, for a lot of people, Malcolm.
I bet it was. I bet it was. It must have come as a real kick in the teeth for everybody who had made the efforts. And, of course, everybody back here on Tyneside, hold your hand up, anybody on Tyneside who doesn't want this deal to go through. I don't think there's a hand to be seen, is there? Everybody is willing this to go through. And I am getting absolutely sick to the back teeth the way the Premier League is carrying on. I really am. I think that I can't recall in all my years anybody having to go through what the Premier League is putting Newcastle through on a takeover. I just can't recall. In any industry, in any business, and the fact that that what's been going on, it's all totally hush hush. No, there's no public witness, as it were, to what's going on, and I think that the way that the Premier League are behaving towards Newcastle supporters and Mike Ashley, Newcastle United as a club, I think is absolutely disgraceful. I really do. And I had this overwhelming feeling that there is a cartel at work, and these are the six who wanted to literally weaken and almost destroy the Premier League by going away. And all of a sudden, for a few million quid, everything's forgotten. Everything's back to normal, and those six who were wanting to do a moonlight flit, they're still pulling the strings of the Premier League. I think it's absolutely disgraceful and disgusting. I really do.
Gibbo, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? I mean, you've covered Newcastle for decades now, and this takeover will probably be the biggest takeover, not just in our history, but in football history in the UK. But we're being denied, I think, quite rightly, as Malcolm says, by a cartel.
I think we indisputably are. But I must say that I've reached the stage now where I'm fed up to the back teeth of it. And I think this, in a perverse way, suits Ashley, because he is now, the current situation with the takeover not having collapsed but having been blocked for the 856th time, it is very convenient now for Ashley to hide behind two big patsies that he can blame, who are the Premier League and Steve Bruce. And in a different way, they are to blame for a lot of Newcastle's ills, but Ashley has got to come out from behind, hiding behind the Premier League's a big bad wolf that won't allow me to do anything, and whatever happens further down the line is Steve Bruce's fault. The tactics, the team, the negativity, etc., etc. And all of a sudden, he's not the bad guy. Well, he's still here. He's been here for 14 years. This takeover has collapsed. It is not going to happen before the new season. It's not going to happen during the new season. He has got to get out front and do the job that he undertook 14 years ago and organise this club before it's relegated, before it hits the buffers, before it has to be sold as a championship club, and get on with allowing signings to take place, if only to protect, from his point of view, his own investment, in allowing this club to stay up, and coming in front of supporters in a statement to say, all right, this has happened, but it is my responsibility, it is my watch. This is what the club will be allowed to do in the transfer market, and this will be my policy for the coming season. Because bottom line, boys, nothing, absolutely nothing has changed. Not a solitary thing has changed. We have lived for 15 months on promises which have come with a nod and a wink from people behind the scenes. We haven't made one step forward. We're still supposed to be happy enough to live on nothing but fresh air. This cannot continue. We know where Newcastle United are going for the moment, and it's nowhere, but we know who's in charge for the moment, because the hope that we've had for 15 months of this takeover actually coming to fruition ain't going to happen anytime soon. But I tell you what is going to happen anytime soon. Newcastle's going to rot, and they're going to sink if action is not taken now. And the only person that can take action now, as in today, 3 weeks before new season starts, the only person that can do that's Ashley. And to be perfectly truthful, he's got to do it, because this ship is the Marie Celeste, is just floating in choppy waters. And if he doesn't take a hold of it, he won't have a club to sell.
Malcolm, John's often, on his soapbox, but never so more when he feels, as angry as he clearly is now. I'm with John on this. I think we're all getting clouded with this takeover chat. But 3 weeks to go, a defeat against York, and we're opening friendly. Tomorrow night's going to be a lot different, because I'm going to be down at Doncaster with 3,000 Newcastle fans. For the first time, we're going to be able to give our views from the terraces towards the team, towards Steve Bruce, and towards, the owner. But ultimately, John's right. We need players in. It's time to at least loosen the purse strings, because he's got to protect his investment.
I don't think he will. I really don't. I think that. I think you look at last season and say, well, we've got the same players as then, and they got us up to 10th. Was it 10th place, 11th place?
13, wasn't it?
13th,
sorry, 13th. Yeah, 13th. And I think his instruction to Steve Bruce will be, do it again. And I fully believe that the 10 million that's been allocated for transfers, which is absolutely nothing Never mind in the Premiership. It's nothing in the Championship, for heaven's sake. But I fully believe that it works out that when Newcastle jumped those 5 places, that they increased their income from the Premier League by 10 million, and that's what Steve Bruce has been given to spend, and so Mike Ashley's got off absolutely scot-free yet again. But at the same time, I think that his argument will be, look, I've had the club sold for all these months. I'm not throwing good money after bad.
Can I ask you this, Malcolm? Will the current squad we've got, Mal, which, and I totally follow your thinking of what Ashley's thinking, I'm suggesting you better not go down that road, because is this squad, minus Joe Willock and his goals as of today, good enough to finish 13th again? I think I think they overhit, and it will take some doing for this squad without Joe Willock's goals to achieve what they ended up achieving at the end of last season. And I wouldn't like to take the risk in the gamble, and I know Ashley is a gambler, I wouldn't like to take the risk in the gamble that we can pull it off, because there's 3 places down the bottom to be filled, and I've got an awful feeling that we'll be there or thereabouts unless something dramatic happens in the next 3 weeks.
John, I fully understand where you're coming from. I really do. Let me just play devil's advocate for the moment. And I'm going to be Mike Ashley asking you for your opinion, John.
Yeah.
John, you've known Newcastle United for all of these decades, and you've seen everything that's gone on. You've been a close confidant to players and managers. So how much would you like me to give Steve Bruce to spend?
Do you mean by that, should I give it to Steve Bruce? Or do you mean that should I put some money in? Because that's a different thing.
I'm accepting that Mike Ashley is he's quite happy with Steve Bruce in the manager's office at the moment.
Yes.
So how much would you like me, Mike Ashley, to give to Steve Bruce to spend?
Well, certainly nothing under 40 million. And if you had 40 million, which is very, very conservative in today's market, you'd have to make certain you didn't spend it all on a Joe Linton. That would be first. That is the other side of the coin, which is worrying, that however much money Newcastle spend, will they spend it wisely? Now, I know, Malcolm, as you do, having been a manager as well as a top player, that there's absolutely no guarantees that any signing you make will automatically come off. Brian Clough made some bad signings. Bob Paisley made some bad signings. Ferguson made some bad signings. They got rid of them double quick, so you hardly remembered they were there. But they made some bad signings. You can't guarantee that. But what you can guarantee with Newcastle United in the current regime is that 3 of their 4 signings will be bad. That's what you can guarantee, because that is what happened a year ago and will happen again. That is the big worry. But if you give, forget whether it's Ashley, if you give any Premier League club that's finished in the bottom half of the table in the last season £10 million to spend, you are saying there's a very good chance you'll go down, and I don't care.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think you're right, Malcolm. I don't think Mike Ashley will do what I want him to do, but what I'm saying is I'm warning him that if he doesn't take his responsibility to safeguard this club, which is, after all, temporarily his club, then we are in grave danger. And we've gone down twice under his rule to start with. And he's in grave danger of that happening again unless some action's taken. And the excuse he had, which was in his eyes a very good one, I've sold this club, so I'm not going to do anything about it. Why should I? And the theory of that is brilliant. Excuse me, you have not sold this club, and that has just been proved in the last week. So forget that. I want him to take the piece of paper that says I've sold this club, put it on the shelf behind him, and leave it there until something happens positive and he can bring it back out. In the meantime, he must act as if this club is not sold. It is still his. It is a house with rotten floorboards, and he's got to do something about it, because if he doesn't, the house will fall down, and then, oh dear me, how do I sell it now? At this moment, this club is not sold. It never has been in his reign, despite a load of false stones. So get on with protecting something you bought.
Yeah, I fully understand what you're saying, John, and I agree with you as myself. But the devil's advocate in me says he just ain't going to bother. He's not going to bother. He is going to instruct Steve Bruce, get the best out of what you've got. You did it last season, do it again this season. But of course, even if Steve Bruce were given money, with the situation going as we're experiencing it right at this moment, will the takeover happen? Won't the takeover happen? Is Mike Ashley going to remain as the owner? Is Steve Bruce going to remain as the manager? Players at other clubs, I can't see how they could be interested in the slightest in joining Newcastle United right now. It's a ship that's on the brink of sinking, and I cannot see any players willing to join. Poor players, yes, but we need good players. We got enough poor players at the start of last season, for heaven's sake. And while they were in the side, look what was going on. It was absolutely appalling to watch. And of course, the results weren't coming. And all of a sudden, on loan. And if I was Steve Bruce, that's what I'd be doing. I would be looking to bring in 3 top players on loan. Bring Willock in, yes, great. Bring him in yet again. But bring in a defender and a forward as well. All on loan. Never mind transfers. Do it on loan. And you pay for loans these days. Nothing comes free. But I would think that the 10 million would cover that, and you can get good players in, really good players.
Yeah, I've got to obviously mention the fact that Lejeune has left today. A couple of people in the chat asking what we think about that, John. I think it was always obvious. I mean, he had 2 really bad injuries. I think it's quite clear to see he was not going to be the player that he was, that we signed. And there was flashes of brilliance, and those 2 goals at Everton, I suppose, were his highlight. But he was never going to be the same player, was he? Really?
No, injuries killed him, Steve. There's absolutely no question about that. He had ability on the ball, composure on the ball. You felt there was a very, very good player there, but he had 2 severe injuries. And however good you are, if the injuries are big ones, and yet not career-ending ones, then you're not the player you were. And we've seen that in an awful lot of players in the past, where if you lose a yard of pace, etc., you're not quite the guy you were. And unfortunately that happened with Lejeune, and it is a case of what might have been, because he was very, very decent, and there's nothing like now. The game in Spain, very good technically, but is played at a slower pace, etc., which will not expose the injuries he's had in quite the same way, because it's not the quickness of the Premier League. And he's at a club where when they play the average sides or the poor sides, he'll be able to organise them and make a little bit of a difference. And when they play Real Madrid and Barcelona and Atletico Madrid, well, if they're well beaten, no, there's not going to be hue and cry. I mean, I wish the boy well, because he never gave Newcastle an ounce of trouble, and he was a talented boy. He was unlucky, full point.
Yeah. I mean, does that mean we need another centre half in, Mal?
Yes, I think it does. But again, look to do loan deals. You can get more quality for your 10 million by doing loan deals, just to get through to the end of this new season. And by then, the takeover will have happened, and all of a sudden there'll be a massive transfer kitty, and they'll be putting in all the people that they want and getting rid of all the people they don't want, and things will seriously turn around.
There we go going down the same route with Fantasy Island again, waiting for the takeover, which is going to change everything. At this time, the takeover ain't going to happen, and the Premier League are obsessed with blocking this takeover. They don't fancy the Saudis, and they're blocking the Saudis at every possible turn. That is the bottom line. They don't want the Saudis in this country for whatever reason. Is it the six? Is it the political side of the argument? For whatever reason, and they won't tell us, they don't want the Saudis. And as long as the Saudis remain as the key part of this takeover, they are sitting tight, and making certain it doesn't happen. I agree with Malcolm about letting us do something now that gets us through this season, but not because I'm hopeful that this takeover will take place, because until it does, I want to forget about the damn takeover, because we have hung our hat on this takeover for so long and it's never happened, that it's become Ashley's excuse for doing nothing. I don't have to do anything. This takeover is going to happen. I'm going to get this pot of gold and be able to leave. Well, the danger between now and they take over, or a takeover happening, the danger is absolutely immense. And as for this transfer window, to make me and a lot of fans comfortable, I would want Joe Willock to be the fella to score goals. I would want a playmaker to come in with him. I would want another striker, and I would want a central defender. And we could improve in other positions, but I think we need two midfield players, a striker and a central defender for starters.
Yeah. Agree.
I would agree. Changing topic slightly, Mal, Colin Wilson asks, what are your feelings on Joe Linton giving the number 9 shirt to Callum Wilson?
Apart from the fact he didn't give it, but if he's got any sense, the relief should have made him grow an extra 6 inches, because it was weighing this so-and-so down. And now at least the right person's got the shirt and the wrong person hasn't. But I do hope, sorry to interrupt, Mal, because this is yours.
That's all right.
I do hope with Joe Linton, because I'm not obsessed with hating the guy, anything but. I just point out he's not worth 40 million and he's not a centre forward. I hope the number 7 is lucky for him, because he needs some luck, and he will be better off. He'll be better off in a shirt that isn't the 9.
I hate to stop you there, John, but I was there at York at the weekend, and I hate to say it, but he's the only Brazilian who cannot play in 28 degrees heat, because he didn't last 25 minutes and he was off.
And by the way, there was a story online today that said Newcastle boost, Joe Linton is fit for Doncaster Rovers. Well, is the word boost the correct word? I don't know.
Who wrote that?
I don't want to go into that, but I almost choked on my sandwich when I saw that. I thought, Newcastle boost, what's happened? what had happened was Joe Linton was fit.
Wow. Well, I mean, I know he's not your favourite. That's an understatement. But he's got the number 7 now. Are we going to see Joe Linton putting in some Kenny Dalglish stroke Kevin Keegan type performances in that number 7 shirt?
No, the fella can't play.
That's a drawback, Malcolm. Yes.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it creates somewhat of a problem. I watched him specifically. I had huge suspicions, and so one particular game, I watched him for the full 90 minutes, counting how many times he retained possession when the ball was played to him, and how many times he lost it. For every 3 times the ball was played to him, he lost it twice. He retained possession only 1 in 3 times that he got possession of the ball. That isn't good enough for a primary school side, for heaven's sake. And here he is in the Premiership. Okay, so he's lost the number 9. He's got the number 7. That suggests to me, frighteningly, that he's going to be playing in the first team still. And I think, for heaven's sake, this is a guy who can't hold possession. He doesn't create. He doesn't score. And I don't see him bringing other players into the game. I don't see him creating anything at all. The fella, it just is not good enough. And you can work with him for all the time in the world. Coaches can work with him. The manager can work with him. Other players can work with him. He won't improve. He ain't good enough. And whoever brought him into the club, I say again, should be sacked.
Yeah. Big shout out to our sponsors. As always, Spider VPN for all your internet security. Google Spider VPN. They come up at the top of the Google search list. They can protect your passwords, your photographs, and everything else on your computer in your house. So Google Spider VPN. Big shout out to them for the sponsorship. And to skipsandbins.com. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy, contract free, and pay as you go waste collection. Also, a big shout out to John from qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend in Newcastle. Also, the guy who runs our website, and Jab Signature as well, just for creating the flyers for the show. Big shout out to John at Jab Signature. If you're a first time visitor to the channel, please subscribe, hit the Newcastle Legends logo in the bottom right hand corner, and that's it. You subscribe for free. I am still managing to do 7 shows a week, 1 each night. Hit the thumb up to like the show and like the video. It does help us. Click share to share to your other social media, and drop into the comments box to talk to like-minded Newcastle fans and perhaps get your comment on screen. We're also available on your podcast providers, iTunes and Spotify for free, and other podcast providers. If you miss us on YouTube and you want to go out and walk the dog and listen to it. Don't forget as well, the Matchday Bucket is still available to donate to the food bank. NUFC fans, foodbank.co.uk. Simply click onto that website and you can donate some money digitally to the food bank. All money is welcome. You've still got time to enter into the prize draw for this one-off watch, and the winner will be announced at the NUFC Matters Charity Pool Night, the 24-hour charity pool night, which has been organised by John from QTech, again raising funds for NUFC fans food bank. Just a quick shout out to a couple of events we've got coming off as well. Liam Kennedy and I will be giving up our time to support the food bank at the Punch Bowl in Jesmond, which is now known as Bobix. Me and Liam will be doing a talk across there just about Newcastle United, looking ahead to the season on the 5th of August. Tickets are £10 and available from www.bobix.com. We will be obviously donating all proceeds to the food bank. Steve Hasty, Bill Corcoran and the lads will be down there that night. And I'm also making a long overdue appearance with Supermac with Malcolm. Me and Malcolm will be out and about at the Farmhouse Kitchen in Gateshead on August the 19th. and you can get tickets for £10 direct from them. And me, Supermac and Gibbo, as long as we don't go back into lockdown, will be at the Tyne Theatre, of course, in September. We will start plugging that next month, but we have an evening with Newcastle legends, lots of former players coming across. We might have to change the guest list depending, of course, on COVID restrictions, but fingers crossed we will be coming out of that and be able to get together. But that should be a cracking night at the Tyne Theatre. So if you go on the Tyne Theatre's website, we'll be able to find out about tickets for that. And don't forget, we haven't forgotten about the Christmas do. We are just waiting to see where Lee Clark ends up, because Lee Clark, of course, is looking for a new job. He's still out in the Middle East, walking around looking for a job by the sounds of it. But if he gets one out there, then obviously then we can plan the Christmas do, although I doubt it will be at Christmas. There's rather unsettling news, Gibbo, about Bobby Clark, and I will have to speak to Lee about this. Bobby's obviously a young, talented player, Lee's son, of course, but he's got a big decision to make, and it looks as if that decision, according to reports today, might just be around the corner. It looks like he might be going to Liverpool.
Yeah, I've heard for a little while now that we are unlikely to be hanging on to him, which is disturbing if the talent is what I'm told it is, and he is a good kid. We've lost a few kids recently, which is bad, because it's hard enough to find. We are very good at jockeying off Geordie's on. How many local Geordies? I mean, the three famous ones were Waddle, Beardsley and Gascoigne, but how many famous who at least made the first team, made it England, and then we cashed in on them? But we do lose players early doors, and that would be unfortunate. Before you move on to the next question, Steve, when you announced about the legends in Supermac that you're staging and Supermac and I are taking part in, I just wanted to check before I formally accept the appointment that Joe Linton, Hendrick and John Joe Shelby on three of the legends that are appearing that evening. Can you confirm that and give it a ticket boost?
I can confirm that they aren't going to be attending, yes. It is more of the old school. As I say, Liam O'Brien is on the list. Lee Clark is on there. We do have lots of great names from the past. But what we need to do is a bit of a head count and a head call and see who's on an amber list, green list, red list, who's got COVID, who hasn't, who's had jabs, who hasn't, who can travel to Barnard Castle and who can't. I guess we've just got to check all of those things before we can even say who's definitely going. I do know currently, you, me, and Malcolm have all had our jabs, and we all live in the locality. We'll be there. I think we can confirm that Joe Allen, who's going to do the comedy that night, he's going to be there. After that, the look of the draw, I guess, with everybody else.
But I mean, when you said that there were legends, I was hoping that Hendrick et al. Didn't take part in a legend show, because that would be stretching the imagination to the same person that wrote there was a boost for Newcastle at Doncaster because Joe Linton was fit.
Yeah, exactly. Mal, just, it'll be a shame if Lee's son leaves. I mean, he's a talented kid. I've watched his progress, and really good player. It would be nice if we could have kept a hold of him. But fair play to Lee, allowing his son to decide what direction he wants to go in. Of course, he can speak to his dad and get guidance, but ultimately it's the kid's decision,
Sure. One of the factors that that father and son Lee will have seriously considered is just how much playtime is given to young lads coming through. You've got Sean Longstaff. Matty Longstaff has suddenly been chucked into the wilderness around the start of last season, and really wasn't seen or spotted after that. So you've got, having come through from the youth, Sean Longstaff. Who else? Nobody. Nobody sort of emerging through. And And that isn't a good record. When you look around the Premiership, that there are youngsters coming through in a lot of sides, being given an opportunity, being given a chance. And Newcastle don't seem to be prepared to give them that chance. And plus, I have to criticise Steve Bruce, because I think that the way in which he handled the whole of last season with Matty Longstaff, I think, is absolutely disgraceful. That the lad, his contract was up, and so he could have left, but he didn't. This is the club that he loves, and so he sort of hung on when there were offers coming in from elsewhere, and he signed. And the club, having given him that contract, what do? Stick him up in the stand. And I just look at that situation and I think, well, that isn't doing good business for anybody, not anybody. And all they're doing is preventing a player from forging his career, which is, I think, it's shocking. And so it makes me question what's going on from the youth right the way up through the different grades, all the way to the manager's office. Things aren't working. They're not being done correctly. They're not being done in good business fashion. And I just think, oh, come on. Newcastle United, you just seem to look in disarray, I'm afraid. And so we're useless. We're absolutely useless in the transfer market, and we're not bringing the youth through as other clubs are doing. And that, to me, that's losing formulas working together.
John Ball asks a question: should we be looking at Freddie Woodman and giving him a chance, to make a stake a claim for the jersey? John, what do you think about that? Obviously, we've got a goalkeeping crisis still. Young Dan Langley, of course, coming in at the weekend, didn't have too much to do. What he did, he did well. Unfortunately, 6'7", the goal he conceded, I thought was poor. Leaning back too far off his line, and he got lobbed with a looping header in the last 5 minutes. But it's a learning curve for him. Probably a little bit too early for that kind of player to be in net, of course. But Freddie Woodman, it seems we've got a decision to make. Dubravka's number one at the moment. Darlow didn't let us down last year, but Woodman, should he stay or should he go? And if he stays, will he get a chance, do you think?
Well, that's a very, very good question. In an ideal world, I would have, having accepted that Dubravka is injured, and for me, and it's just a personal opinion, he is unquestionably my number one Newcastle United goalkeeper. But with him injured, what I would like to have seen pre-season is Steve Bruce being able to use half a dozen games to put Darlow and Woodman in there and say, right, you fight each other for the first team shirt. One of you is going to get the first team, instead of it being automatically Darlow, because it was going to be automatically Darlow, because Bruce had already shown his hand by allowing Woodman to go out on loan to Bournemouth before he had to bring him back. So it was going to be Darlow as the number two. I would have preferred them to give games to both Darlow and Woodman and say, okay, it's pressure. Is it fair? Is it not fair? We aren't in the game to be fair. We are in the game to get the best for Newcastle United. One of you two will start. What has scuppered all that, boys, quite obviously, is COVID, because they're both in isolation. They both have 10 days in isolation. In the meantime, friendlies are disappearing, like York, like Doncaster, like they're coming at a rate of knots, but disappearing at a rate of knots. I think there's about 2 left where by the time these two guys are out of isolation, so it's then difficult. But I think that a decision on Woodman is got to be made so quickly it's untrue. He is not going to allow himself to go out on loan for experience for much longer before he wants a first team shirt permanently somewhere, because over the last 2 seasons, when he was at Swansea, he's played 90 odd games, you know. That is very good experience. He was voted Championship Goalkeeper of the Year last season. He played for England from under 16 to under 21 level. He won the European Championship at under 17. He won the World Cup at under 20. He is not going to continue to go out on loan before he wants to transfer. And we've got to make certain we don't lose possibly the goalkeeper that we need just by jocking him off and getting a few quid, because Dubrovka's, I know goalkeepers have a long shelf life as opposed to outfield players, but Dubrovka's 32, Darlow's 31 this season. Gillespie, for that matter, is 29, although he doesn't really come into the picture. So a decision has to be made, and I'm getting a little bit concerned that he'll just slip away without a decision being made, and we might just have a gem on our hands. I'm not having to go at Darlow, who did brilliant last season. Dubrovka is my number one, but we're going to have to make a decision. And I would like to see Woodman given the opportunity to start the season against West Ham. I think not the fault of Bruce, but the fault of coronavirus. Almost in a situation where that's not going to happen with a couple of friendlies to go. But I think there's a big decision to be made for Woodman. He's 24 now. He's got a lot of experience, 90-odd games in the last 2 seasons. He is not going to go on. If he goes on loan to Bournemouth for this season, that's his last loan period, mate. After that, he'll be saying, I'm a first-team keeper. Is it at Newcastle? If it's not, sell me.
And at the same time, John, I'm not so sure that Darlow could be at all happy in having been dropped during last season anyway, when Dubravka was fit again.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely right.
So
the way he was dropped, Malcolm, the way he was dropped as well, mate.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And so I'm wondering whether it's Woodman who deserves the opportunity, and it's maybe Darlow who should be allowed to go, not the other way round.
Yeah. Craig says, can anyone clear this up for me? If we went down, would the takeover be easier to get through, not having to deal with the Premier League? I hate to say it, Craig, but no. We'd have to go back to the start, an owners and directors test. The club, which I already believe is worth a hell of a lot less than the Saudis are paying for us because of the COVID situation alone, would be further devalued. I just think that the deal collapse, and as Gibbo quite rightly says, I guess there's no takeover at the minute. You know, it's on hold. The Premier League don't want it to go through, and from my perspective, although I know that, and it's quite clear, Amand Ramierdad is still at the table, which means PIF and the Rubens are, otherwise they wouldn't be looking to push the deal through. It's in the hands of lawyers. That's where we're at. But going down into another league, I'm afraid not. I couldn't see the Saudis being interested in buying a championship team. Not on your Nelly, shall we say. Nicholas says, seen today the picture.
Style, is it?
No. They want to come through flags waving into a Premier League team. Nicholas has seen today the picture of Supermac at the open air pool at the coast with a beauty queen. Cracking flares there, Marley says. Yeah, we've had that one up on here before.
And that was just last week, guys.
It was just last week.
Oh, she was a lovely lass. She was Miss South Shields, and I'm trying to think. Was it? It was to do with Tyne Tees and the Evening Chronicle in conjunction, I believe.
It was. It.
And the photograph that's usually used, we were actually stood on the springboard. over the water, and I would have hated for the poor lass to have fallen in and spoiled their hairstyle.
A beehive.
Yeah.
Alan Thompson, he says there are 11 big decisions to be made, John, for our first team. Our team is very poor, he says, in his opinion.
Yeah, I think, well, there's a lot of decisions to be made, Alan, that's for certain. I mean, there's no decision to be made. If everyone's fit, there's no decision to be made about the number 9. That will be Callum Wilson, and so it should be. But I mean, then you're looking all over the shop and saying, yes, who's automatic? You can look at the centre backs and what happens there. You can look at the 2 central midfielders, and if Willock's not there, and is it a Shelby boost for the start of the season, or is it a hammer blow if he doesn't play? With all these boost headlines, so yeah, I mean, there's so much that's open. I mean, if we're truthful, you would think Dubrovka and Callum Wilson, under normal circumstances, everybody fit, or 2 knocking bets, and then where do you go from there? You're right. Every decision can be technically up for grabs, because nothing is written, is it, in stone? Right.
I would say some maximum.
Sorry, if fit, absolutely. And Almiron will get in because he runs everywhere and he's willing. So Almiron will get a place. Probably at left back, mind, but he'll get a place.
Yeah.
That's his trouble, Malcolm. Almiron's so willing that he's his own worst enemy, because we then play him everywhere bar his natural position, which is number 10, which is where he wants to play. But because he's willing and because he'll run all day long, we just play him wherever there's a hole that day, and he goes.
Yeah, but the shame of it is, though, that the lad, he is so willing, but he's actually being turned into a headless chicken. And he just runs and runs and runs all over the place, and he doesn't really achieve much from the position that he's playing in. You want him to score a few goals in the season, and you want him to make more than he scores, and he's not doing either.
Yeah, that's fair comment.
Yeah, it is a good question from Chippers, and I guess it's a question you ask if there's no takeover goes through, John, and you, Malcolm. Do you think that this will be Bruce's last season? His contract runs out next summer. Do you think it would be extended, guys?
Well, the great concern is that it might well be, because if this season, the great concern for Newcastle United fans, because if this season is, as I've suggested it will be, sadly, i.e. Mike Ashley will be the owner for the whole of this coming season, then the decision is his as the season comes to an end, because he's got to decide whether, if he's still in charge, he leaves Bush in that suits him ideally, or he takes Bush out, and then what does he do with a new search for a manager? You've got to hope that the takeover is going to happen, but I'm not going down that route, because I'm sick to death of going down that route. But it is a fascinating thing.
Yes, if the takeover hasn't happened, I think that what Mike Ashley will do come the end of this season, and no takeover, he will look at the cost, and it will be cheaper to give Bruce a new contract, because he comes in a lot cheaper than anybody else, and that's why he was brought in in the first place, because he was cheaper than anybody else. That's how Mike Ashley works. And it doesn't matter what the business, whether it be his sports shops or whether it be the football club.
Yeah, and he was 11th choice, Mal. He was 11th choice. There were so many knockbacks. He was the last man available.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's gonna happen is if this season is as we all three expect it to be, which is owner Mike Ashley, manager Steve Bruce, fans back in St James's Park, what it'll be like by the season comes to an end. Will Steve Bruce, even for a certain amount of money, wish to stay manager of Newcastle United, or adjourn to a darkened room with a wet Evening Chronicle to put over his forehead because of the stick taken from the terraces? It is going to be absolutely fascinating, isn't it, guys? Maybe it's not in the way we would wish it to be absolutely fascinating, like who we're going to sign for £40 million tomorrow, and how high are we going to end up the table, and might we get into Europe, but a different sort of macabre fascination, like pulling your teeth out with a pair of pliers on the back lawn. But it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, 3,000 of us there at Doncaster tomorrow, so a lot of us will be flexing our vocal cords, that's for sure. Let's see what happens tomorrow night. Paul Rocket says, Malcolm, you were not born in Newcastle. You played for Luton, Arsenal and Newcastle. And when you retired, what was your main reason for you to settle back in the North East?
Right. The list of my clubs he's left one out. Fulham was my first club, and from there I went to Luton. But quite simply, the reason was that John and I, it had been arranged for us to do a number of talk-ins, and on my way up, I was contacted by Century Radio. And they said, "We hear that you're coming up to the Northeast. Would you come and do an interview?" And so I said yes, of course. And so I went there, and they seemed to like what I did in a radio studio, and they gave me my own program. Very nice of them, thanks. And then when it was taken over by Capital, then they decided to make it a more global program, and the Legends was started, so that the three major clubs in the Northeast were covered, with Gatesy from Sunderland, Bernie Slavin from Middlesbrough, and myself from the Newcastle corner, and that just went on, and so I've found that I'm still up here, and in all honesty, thoroughly enjoying it.
Good stuff, and we love having you here, Mal. Spenny Mag says, question for John. See, the Chronicle are going on a lot about the Lamina deal. Do we think this is done? I mean, I've seen a few outlets reporting the same story. Of course, Lamina, a midfielder who went to Southampton for a big fee, hasn't quite hit the heights under the manager. Clearly don't get on, found himself down the pecking order. Lots of talk as well, linking Hayden to a possible move to Southampton. We know under Rafa who's keen for a move down south, John. Is this something, do you think, that could either go alongside the Willock deal or might replace the Willock deal?
I think there's a very, very good chance that this guy will end up here. I think it's a long way down the road. It fits in. He's not too expensive. There's not a lot of other suitors that are trying to pull him the other way. And I think, and the thought he starred for Fulham last season, which is one of the reasons they want to do it. Hayden's a non-starter. Hayden will not go the other way. That is not on. And a lot of people, Newcastle fans, will be pleased for that. Yes, I think this kid, he fits in the total criteria of what Newcastle are looking at with the blinkers, etc. And of course, this is Ashley's major gesture towards loosening some of my thinking, because he originally blocked it because the guy's 28 in a few months' time, so he's too old for Newcastle, and he's now saying, all right, you can go ahead. do you think that might be not a magnanimous gesture because of his age, but because he's not costing too much money? As I suspect that's got something to do with it. I don't think this guy replaces Willock at all in the thinking. I believe we need two midfield players. But I mean, this guy wouldn't score the 8 goals Willock got in half a season in the 3 years that his contract's going to be at Newcastle, because he's more defensive, he's more negative, and I don't mean that in a nasty way. You need that type of player as well, but he's not the Willock type of player at all, and it would leave more than enough room for Willock to come to Newcastle as well. But yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance of it happening.
Yeah. What about you, Mal? Is that a player that sets your pace, your heart racing?
No, no, it really doesn't. He's not proved himself at all, really, and if he hasn't proved himself, what do Newcastle see in him?
They see that he's affordable because he hasn't proved himself.
Oh, absolutely, John. But you know, again, I go back to what I said nearer to the beginning of the program, that why not get better quality in on loan while everything's going on, instead of scrabbling about for really cheap deals. Cheap deals don't get you anywhere in the Premier League, for heaven's sake. Oh dear me, I really do find myself just getting so concerned, because what Newcastle what they're doing is they're sort of spiraling down, and they're bringing more and more poor to average players in, and they're filling the club with average or down to poor players. Tell me one quality player in the whole of the club.
Well, I still say Matt Ritchie is, but I'm biased with Matt Ritchie. I think he's still a quality turn, and I mean, you know,
yeah, okay,
he's a 7 out of 10, and I think Dubravka as well. Apart from those two,
as a goalkeeper, but what we
Callum Wilson and San Maximum.
Callum Wilson scored 12 goals. To me, John, that ain't enough.
It isn't, but he only played 20-odd games, didn't he?
Well, then there's a question mark about whether he can stay in.
Yeah, about his fitness, absolutely.
Yes, and you know that you see, there are things going on that I truly cannot understand. That there's been a player sat on the bench for just about the whole of the season, and yet they've just given him a 3-year contract. They've given him a 3-year contract because what? He looked good on the bench, and I just don't understand it at all. The thinking or the lack of thinking, the lack of logic that's going on behind the scenes. Well, I have to say I am fearing the worst. The longer this goes on, the more I fear the worst.
Yeah, sorry if you're tuned in to be cheered up, guys, tonight. It's not the happiest of shows, I've got to be honest. No takeover, no players, no hope, I think is where we've left that tonight, as the clock has beaten us. safe travels to everybody who is going down to Doncaster. If you're down there tomorrow night, come across and say hello and we'll have a little bit of crack. But I'm looking forward to it. Getting back on the road again was great. Got to do as many as we can. We just don't know where on earth we're going to be at in the next couple of months with this COVID situation, and just got to grasp every opportunity you can to get a chance to watch Newcastle, even if it isn't the best of times at the moment. John, Malcolm, as always, thanks for sparing an hour of your lives to come on and talk football with me. Look forward to seeing you again next week, guys.
Indeed.
God bless. Take care.
All right, everybody, have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn.